Hello, my name is Aaron Dickinson from ShowingTime, and I'll be your presenter today. We are going to get started. So today's webinar is being recorded, and you'll get a copy of the session recording about an hour after the webinar is complete. This is also a live session here. We've got a lot of people on the call here from your association, and we want to make sure that if you have any questions about what I'm going through here today, that we've answered those. So please feel free to type those questions in, and we'll either answer those live, either myself or someone else on our team, or we'll circle back with you after the webinar if we need to. So today we're going to be looking at your latest member benefit, which is the InfoSparks interactive reporting tool. Then we'll be looking at some usage examples, some caveats, and frequently asked questions. And again, I welcome your questions as we're going here today. So we're going to get right into things here and look at the InfoSparks tool, which was just launched in your market. Now, there's a number of ways to access this. However, the easiest one is probably directly from your MLS dashboard. You'll see a new icon in there as of today. It says MarketStats. I put a big arrow pointing to it. When you click on that, that'll launch you into InfoSparks. And so when you click on that icon, this is what you'll see. With InfoSparks, what we have is the ability to interactively look at housing data for the entire MLS or zoom into specific locations and look at very specific segments of the housing market. So it's a tool that allows you to visualize housing data in many different ways. When you first log into InfoSparks, you're typically going to be viewing the entire MLS region. And at the bottom, there's a number of metrics we can look at in different visualizations. But before I do that, I want to show you how you can narrow down your criteria here and look at stats in very specific segments. So in the upper left-hand corner is our area selection tool. When I click on that, I can scroll through a list of available areas. I can filter by different area types here to reduce that list. Or I can simply type in the box the area that I would like to look at for stats. So when I found that location, click on it, and if you note the chart below was updated automatically, that's one of the neat things here is that anytime we make a change to any of our settings, we're going to see those stats reflected immediately in the chart below. So now I'm looking at currently the median sales price for properties in Tulsa. Now I can do some further refining and narrowing down of what we're looking at here based off of the characteristics of the properties that are selling. I can filter by things like price range, property type, square footage, bedrooms, bathrooms, seller type. And if I use this horizontal scroll here, I can also filter based off of construction type and year built. So for example, I could say I want to look at previously owned, traditional sales of single family properties. And as you noticed, every time I made any selection changes there, I was seeing those stats update at the bottom to reflect those changes. So we can also narrow it down further, say looking at just properties that are 3 bedrooms. Or if we want to look at more than one of these at a time, we can look at 3 bedrooms as well as 4 bedrooms or more. When I click the plus button here, that's going to add it to the results. So now I'm looking at everything that's 3 bedrooms and more. But in many cases, what you might actually want to do is compare and contrast. So we can use the split button here at the top of this column to split this out into separate lines for 3 bedroom and 4 bedroom or more. And as one would expect, properties that have more bedrooms typically sell for significantly more money. Now, when you're doing these filters, we also have the ability here to customize the price range and square footage ranges so you can create your own. I click on the custom button and then type in the ranges that I'd like. And then once I have those custom filters, I can apply those and look at the stats for just those specific segments of the market. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that you can get overly aggressive with your metrics here or your filters and end up with something like this. So in this situation here, this looks weird, right? Well, what you've done is created something that rarely exists in nature. So with all these filters applied, single family house, 2,200 square feet or more, 3 bedrooms or more, 1 bathroom or fewer, that's a very small group of properties that would match that. And so this tool is designed to help show you trends in the market, but it wouldn't replace a CMA. In a CMA, you want to be specific and you want to be detailed because you're trying to get a very small number of properties that are good comps to directly adjust against. With InfoSparks, we want to be a little bit broader in our settings because we want to understand the overall trends in supply and demand and pricing and whatnot. But we need to do that with a broader basket because we need a good sample size to chart. And so when you see incomplete lines or you see sharp lines like this, that's telling you your data size, your sample size is very small. There's just not a lot to chart. And so consequently, that's why things look like this. So in this situation, if I back off one of these filters, if I go to all square footages, we see a few more, but we're still seeing a lot of sharp data points. And so in Tulsa, that's a big area, so a lot of sales to work off of. But you might also see this kind of volatility in a small area without nearly as many filters applied. So again, when you see something like this, this is telling you your sample size is pretty small. So in this case, I probably would want to back off that bathroom filter as well. And when I do so, I end up with charts that behave a lot more like you would expect. They're pretty clean, pretty clean trend lines there. We can also not only look at comparing, contrasting different segments like 3 bedrooms versus 4 bedrooms, but we can compare and contrast different areas as well. When I click on the Add an Area tab here at the top, I can add additional locations to compare with. You can add up to 3 other areas to compare. And for each one of these tabs, you would just simply select the location that you want to compare with. And so while you can do 4 areas at a time, I find that most of the time less is more. You can have too much data on the screen, which makes it more difficult to interpret. And keep in mind too, some of you are data nerds like me, you love lots of data, but a lot of people don't do as well with too much information. So when comparing areas, oftentimes I find it easiest to compare one area to another or one area to the entire MLS as a whole, and just kind of keep that comparison simplified. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you add new custom areas, the new area will become the default the active tab here. And by default, it'll set up with no filters applied. And whichever tab is active at the time, the filters that are in that tab are being applied to everything you see at the bottom. So right now, the second tab, the entire MLS tab, is highlighted. That means that we currently have no filters applying to both the Tulsa and entire MLS charts here at the bottom. I can either come in here and apply my set of filters that I want in this tab, or if I want the previous filters I had applied, I can just simply go back to the first tab here, and you can see that I have my single family traditional previously owned filters applied here. So just keep in mind whichever tab is active and the filters you see, that's being applied to everything below. All right, so that's how you can really narrow your focus. Now I want to go and look broadly again. We're going to look at the entire region and want to walk you through all the different metrics and visualizations we can do here. So right now we're looking at median sales price, but we can also look at average sales price. We can look at things like price per square foot and percentage of original price, and actives and pendings. And I'm going to walk back to some of these metrics here in a few. I want to show you a couple of metrics that may be less familiar to you. The first one here is shows to pending. And this is using the ShowingTime showing data to give you a sense for how many showings does it take for a property to go from active to pending status. And so this chart will obey any of the filters you've applied at the top. And then it'll further narrow the scope of the results to just properties that had ShowingTime enabled on them during the listing period. And of that basket of properties, how many showings does it take for a property to go from active to pending status? So this can be helpful in a couple of ways. Number one, it can help set up some expectations with your seller ahead of time. Also, it gives you another guidepost on that path to selling a home and another opportunity to go back to the seller to talk about making course corrections if you find that the home doesn't sell quickly. And so in normal conversation would be something like, Mr. Seller, right now we're finding that it's taking about 2 weeks for properties to go under contract. And as of today, we see that for quite some time, most sellers were getting asking price or a little better on the home. However, in the last month here, we've seen that sellers are now negotiating a little bit off of asking price. So we should expect to have to move a bit off of that. And it's typically taking in that 2 weeks about 7 showings to sell a home. And so that gives you that expectations up front. And then if you've gotten to, say, week 3 on the market and maybe you've had 10 showings, you now have more information to go back to the seller with and explain that, by now, Mr. Seller, more than half of homes have sold, and we've hit these kind of milestones. We still don't have an offer. It's still a pretty active market. We probably want to make some course corrections now so that we don't end up being stale on the market. So that can give you some informational points to help make those course corrections if you need to. The second stat is shows per listing. And this is, again, obeying all of the filters at the top and using that showing data. And it's telling you how many showings are happening per listing per month. And this can be exceptionally beneficial if you've been on the market, say, over a month and you're not getting a lot of showing activity and you're not sure, is it me or the market? And by that, I mean, is there a problem with the listing? And so buyers just simply aren't looking at it? Or is the market as a whole slow? And so you can apply those filters at the top, again, like you would to narrow it down to properties similar to your listing, and then look to see what this is saying for shows per listing. So here we're seeing 4.5 showings per listing in the most recent month. And so if you've had 1 showing in September and the typical property was seeing almost 5, that gives you, again, more information to go back to the seller. Listen, Mr. Seller, typical homes like yours are getting 5 showings per month. We had 1 showing last month. So that means there's buyers out there, but they're rejecting your home online and they're not even scheduling a showing. And so we need to make a course correction, price reduction, or other improvement to get the home marketable so that we can get people through the door. Because your first showing happened online. Your second showing is really that in-person showing, and we need to get those. And the only way to do that is to make sure that we can appeal to that buyer in their online view first. So it's a great way, again, to help make those course corrections. All right, so let's go back to some traditional stats here, like pending sales. There's a lot of other things we can do with this data now to visualize it. By default, we're looking at a 3-year view, which is actually the last 3 calendar years plus the current year. We can look at a 1-year view, which is last year plus this year. We can also go and do my favorite, which is max. And in this view, we can go all the way back to 2005, quite some time ago, 16, 17 years here. So what this does is it allows us to get a better context for the big picture in the market. And so what's been happening the last couple of years isn't typical for the housing market. And so we can get a sense for what things used to be like, say, in the pre-COVID period, 2019, or going all the way back to the last housing boom and bust. And so what's beautiful here is that you can get a sense in the default view here, we're looking at monthly. So every point on this chart is showing you the activity in that given month. You can see odd things that come in, like when we had COVID first start here in 2020, you could see how all of a sudden your market demand just shot up after we got through that initial shock of COVID. We can also see things like back here in 2010, there was a first-time home buyer tax credit. And so it pulled a lot of buyer activity the first half of the year, and then it was very quiet the second half of the year. So you can see all of those special kinds of events. You can also see the typical seasonality in the market. But we can also visualize this in other ways. And so the first thing we can do is switch from a monthly view to a rolling 12-month view. And in that view, what we're doing is we're annualizing each point on the chart. So in this case, we're seeing not 27,897 pending sales in September, but in the 12 months ending September. And so what that does for us is it gives us a bigger picture. It kind of smooths out the trends and gives you a sense for where is the market going broadly. And so in this situation here, we see, we can easily identify the activity of COVID and how we're pulling back on sales activity here. Now, historically, your pending sales were in the 20 to 25,000 pending sales per 12 months per year, basically. And so one would expect that as we're leaving the COVID period, that historical trends and activity are more likely to occur. So one would expect that we will end up fully reverting back to pre-COVID levels here. And so we can see, the bottom in the market in your market demand, an annualized activity of about 12,200 pending sales in a 12-month period. And we went all the way up here to more than double that. We're likely going to end back, in 12 months, we're going to end back somewhere along here simply because that's your historical prior levels pre-COVID. We can also visualize this in an additional way, looking at bar charts. And in a bar chart format, we're looking at up to 3 years worth of sales activity. And we can see here the monthly pending sales for September of 2020, 2021, and 2022. So what I like to do is look at all these different metrics in different ways, different time periods, looking at it monthly versus rolling period to get a sense for what's that fundamental activity doing, and then also what's the long-term trend and the short-term immediate trend. So there's a lot of different ways to view this. So now I'm looking at the new listing activity, which is also extremely seasonal. We see that recently here, new listing activity is down 4.9% from the previous year's September, so year over year. But if I look at this in the rolling 12-month period, we get a sense for activity here. So while buyer activity went up during the COVID times, seller activity actually declined pretty sharply during that time and seems to be trending back down again. And that's in large part this year, not so much to COVID, but towards what's going on with interest rates. There's an expectation that some potential sellers are simply not going to sell because moving to a new property would create a huge increase in their monthly mortgage because the mortgage rates have moved so far. So we might expect that going forward, new listing activity would remain below where it was pre-COVID. And then if we look at homes for sale, in this view, this is one that probably monthly makes the most sense because it is a very seasonal number. Your homes for sale activity is still, or your inventory, I should say, your homes for sale total is very low compared to pre-COVID levels. It has zoomed up quite a bit here this year, but it still remains very, very low relative to your history. And if we look at month supply, we can see month supply still remains lower than it was pre-COVID as well. And then, of course, sales prices. And this was something that I thought was quite interesting, was that your sales prices didn't really have a retreat in the last housing bust. In the period of 2008 to 2012, most markets saw a fairly severe decrease in median sales price. Your market did not, which kind of amazed me because you're one of the few that did not. Now, if we look at the more recent periods here, you can really see when price appreciation in your market has been going on pretty healthily here for all of this time period. But it really kicked on the afterburners when we got into COVID. And almost every market did see this more meteoric rise here in pricing the last few years. And so this does create a little bit of a concern as to how durable is this price appreciation that we've seen in the last few years, simply because it doesn't have a match in any time in previous history. And also, too, that's coupled with the fact that mortgage rates have gone up very substantially. So while what we see from your market is that yours is more durable, it's more reliable and steady than many other markets were, because you didn't have the price correction in the last in the housing bust that happened in the 2000s. I do have some expectation that you may see a small decrease in price in your market area simply because of the factors that are going up against you right now. Home prices are at record highs, but mortgage rates are at a very high level compared to where they have been the last few years. So affordability is really plummeted. And at some point, that becomes a major impact to buyer activity. And we're seeing that in pending sales. Your pending sales activity this year has been notably softer than the last couple years and continues to follow the trend here throughout much of the country where buyer activity is declining a bit more as the fall continues. So one might expect that your prices might fall a bit simply because of how far they've come in the last few years. But looking at all of your data, you're nowhere near some of the markets that had just massive increases in prices, much more than yours, and are seeing even more substantial declines in pending sales activity right now. Your market, I would say, is maybe average-ish, maybe slightly better than average for decrease in pending sales. A lot of markets are seeing 30, 40% decline year over year. And that will certainly more likely than not push prices down more in those areas than what you might see in yours. Of course, none of us has a crystal ball, and the longer that mortgage rates continue on at their high levels, I think the more pressure there will be for continued decreases in pending sales and more pressure to see pricing fall a bit. And so we did have a question coming in here about how far back does this data go? And this system is able to report back to 2005. And so we've got 16, 17, 18 years here of sales data. And so that's as far back as these reports go. All right, so let's take a look here. I really like that median sales price chart because, again, it's so unusual to see a market that did not see price decreases in the last housing cycle. And so you've got this chart. It's pretty interesting to me. If it's interesting to you and you want to use this in your business, what are your options here? Well, the first thing you can do is hit the print button, and this will give you a PDF or Adobe Acrobat file for the chart. At the top is some agent branding and contact information. I'll show you how you can customize that here in a couple of minutes. And then we've got our chart. At the bottom, it'll tell you if you have any filters applied. It'll also tell you if you're looking at this in a monthly or rolling period view and when the report was made and where the data came from. So that's the print format. If we click the share button, we have a few other options. The first question we're asked here is, do we want a static chart or a live chart? A static chart means we're taking a snapshot of the chart as you see it today. And if you come back in a week or in a month, you'll see exactly what you see right now. With the live chart option, we're going to update the chart you share out anytime we update InfoSparks. And we update InfoSparks every night through the end of the month prior. And so in this situation, we're in the middle of October and we're reporting through September. Come November 1st, we'll start updating InfoSparks to show sales through October. And if you've shared out a live chart, those charts will also be updated to show sales through October. In most cases, I think a live chart is preferred because you're always getting the most current data. But if you cited the number of closed sales in a given month, you might not want those numbers or that chart to change. So in that situation, you may want to use the static chart. Let's look at the social media and email share version. When I click the share button, I get a URL that I can copy and paste wherever I'd like to use it. If we hit view new window, we can take a look. It's similar to the PDF. However, there are a few differences. First of all, we can mouse over the chart and see all of the data points. We have some share buttons here at the top that make it easy to share out to Facebook, Twitter, and others. You can download the PDF version in the upper right-hand corner. You can download the the PNG, the picture of the chart, or the CSV file. This would allow you to create your own chart styles and types. Finally, you can simply bookmark this URL. Because I chose the live chart option, if I come back to this chart a month from now, it'll be updated with last month's activity. And so if I like to use these charts regularly for my business, for either just to keep tabs on what's going on in my market area, or I like to review these charts with my clients, bookmark the ones that you like to use frequently, and then you can just simply go back to your browser bookmark. You won't have to log back into the MLS and then go back into InfoSparks to recreate them. If I click the share button, I want to show you another option here. Again, most of the time you want to do a live chart. We can also embed these charts into our own website or blog. And so we can do that here as an image or interactive. Choose a default size or create a custom size, and then get a snippet of code. You would grab that entire snippet of code and copy and paste that into your website's HTML. And when you do that, you'll get something like this. At the top, you still have some agent branding built in, and we've got that interactivity in the chart, but imagine the rest of your website's content is around it. So it gives you the ability to create stats pages on your website that are updated for you automatically. If you have questions on how to use the tool, there's a question mark button in the top that'll give you a little tool tip. There's also a user manual and FAQ with a lot of information in here. It will walk you through a demo video, and then you can scroll through the manual or navigate on the left-hand side. The metrics section talks more about what the metrics are and how they're calculated. And then the share section talks more about how shared charts work. Do note, though, that eventually shared charts will expire if they're not periodically accessed, and the details on that are located in the section I just highlighted. Also at the top is your profile. This is where you can upload your agent photo or logo. You can also update the contact information that displays on the charts. Just make sure to hit the update profile button at the bottom. And then finally is the My Area section. This allows you to create your own custom area and run reports on it. So I can simply click in here and draw an area. I can grab any of these corners and make adjustments. If I want to draw a circle instead of polygon, I can do that. You can have multiple shapes if you want. You can delete shapes if you make any errors. Once you've got the area you want, save it and name it whatever you'd like. It'll think for a minute. It'll then tell us how big of an area we have and how many listings are in it. If I click the See Stats link here, it's going to load me back into InfoSparks, and now I can view the stats for this custom area I just created, and I can do any of the filters and metrics and everything that I could with any of the other areas in the tool. So again, how to access this, click on that MarketStats icon in the dashboard. There are a few other ways how to access this, and I'll show you that in a minute. So in summary here with InfoSparks, you have the ability to filter based off of geography, filter based off of the characteristics of the properties that are selling, look at line charts and bar charts, look at more than 15 years of sales history, look at things in a monthly or rolling period view. And then at the bottom here, we've got all those different metrics as well. You also have the ability here to customize the price ranges and square footage ranges and create your own area and make charts that are great for sharing. So if there's any questions on InfoSparks, please feel free to send those in. We have just a few minutes left in the session. Going to walk through some use cases and some frequently asked questions, but again, I want to answer any questions you might have. So the first thing here are some usage examples. You can use these embedded charts to create content on your website that's updated for you automatically. We can also use this to help bolster listings, show how an inventory in the area is low, show how pricing is going up, and use that to help support the marketability of a property. You can compare and contrast different segments of the market, new versus existing, single family versus townhouses. Compare and contrast different communities, talk about how the housing in the communities are different and the pricing and affordability varies between them. Create a ton of content for your blog, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, you name it. There's so much that you can do in here. Just talk about a couple of the stats that are going on in your local market, and then talk about some of your own recent experiences and use that as a way to keep your sphere updated as to what's going on in the market. with local data. Whatever you see for national market data is almost always going to be incomplete or just straight wrong compared to your local area. And so it's important to remember that real estate is local. They want, all buyers and sellers should have a local expert, and that should be you. And so remind them, talk about what's going on, and give that information out freely and regularly. And when people are thinking of buying or selling a home, they will think of you. The data we use for these reports comes from your MLS. Part of the reason you get things like notices to correct a listing is because it's important for that data to be accurate so that there's good information that can be used for comps, CMA stuff, or for things like this with stats. We update InfoSparks every night through the end of the month prior. Comes November 1st, we'll start showing stats for October. However, I usually wait till about the 5th or the 6th of the month before I rely too heavily on things like pending and closed sales, simply because it does take a couple of days for everyone to close out their books for the previous month, and we want to make sure that we're getting a comprehensive number. So wait till about the 4th or 5th or 6th of the month for things like pending and closed sales. The monthly view is great for understanding what's going on in the market today and seeing the seasonality and short-term volatility. But you also want to do a big picture look at the market, so that rolling 12-month view is great for that. Make sure you see not only what's going on right now, but what are those underlying trends. How to access. Now, again, your dashboard is a big place to go to. This icon actually has been renamed here to say InfoSparks on it as of this morning. So that's number one, the best way to get to it. However, we have other access points as well. There's a link here in the external links section in Matrix. We also have a little widget here at the bottom of the Matrix home screen where you can look at different metrics or hit the More Stats link there, and that'll launch you into InfoSparks as well. And then in ShowingTime, under your reports section, you have a link there as well. And one more here, inside of any showing confirmation email you get, at the very bottom of that, you'll see a chart as well that you can click on, and that'll have median sales price for the entire MLS versus the zip code of the property you're looking at. So many different ways to access this tool. If you're a big data nerd like me, you may compare this to an MLS report and find that they don't match. If they're off by a couple, don't worry about it. Every computer system looks at data slightly differently. We also do a tiny bit of data scrubbing to eliminate things like property that says it's been on the market for 9,000 days. We'll assume it hasn't been for sale for two decades. However, if you find that the numbers are off significantly, 99.9% of the time, that's because you're not comparing apples to apples. So double check the filters that you've applied between the systems. We are looking solely at residential MLS data. We do not pull any public records or commercial or multifamily data into these reports. The user manual and FAQ is a great place to go for assistance. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to the MLS or contact us at ShowingTime. The contact email for ShowingTime is in the user manual and FAQ help section. And then, of course, you're welcome to share these reports out to Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, anywhere you want to use them. We just ask that you keep the citation at the bottom of the report that says where the data came from. Just like in college, it's important to cite your sources. That is our presentation for the day. You will get a copy of this recording in about an hour, and we'll stick around here and answer any final questions that come through. Otherwise, thanks so much for coming today. I hope this was beneficial, and I hope you use this in your business. Have a great day.